All right, so we're still in the first act of the mind. Let's look at extension and comprehension of terms. These are new words for you, okay? And the actual, they talked quite a bit in the book, and they gave you like a list, I remember, where they had what they called synonyms of each. I'm trying not to do that with you because it's hard enough to learn what one word means, let alone, well, all these words kind of mean the same thing. So I'll take some questions if you have it when I explain what these are, but you're probably better off to wait until I put some graphics up, and that might help, okay? But what you have to get from the beginning is we might already have in our head what extending means and what comprehending means. Just put that off to the side. These are used philosophically, so they have a different sense, all right? So the extension of a term. This is going to refer, I will say, to what is the range of the term. Okay, the extension of a term refers to the range of a term, everything it can extend to. Like, what can we extend this term to include? So the extension of the term refers to the range of that term, what it extends to. Now, in your book, and this is all for your book, so I'm adding nothing, it talks about how sometimes this is the class of the thing, right? We could see like what's within that class in this. They said, it represents the quantity. Sometimes, like, we might even say the more accidental of the thing rather than something that's within its nature, right? This is, I don't like to say things generally or informally because they could be in error, but if you want a simple way to kind of put this in your head now, this is the extension of all the things it can be, right? And again, when I put the graph up, that makes more sense, okay? But for instance, if I were to say, what is the extension of the term chair? It's what can apply to all the different types of chairs. Bar stool, Adirondack chair, beach chair. Those would, all fall into the extension categories, okay? And that's such. Oh, I guess I had it up there. It includes the class members or the quantity of a thing. So if you're trying to figure out how to use this word, what can that term or concept extend to? How can I use it to talk about all the things that are within that class? And again, you know me, I'm visual. I have to put this, and I did this for myself. I'm only offering you what I had to do for myself. I really do need, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you in actually a copy of my copies of Aristotle's Post-Theory and Anterior Analytics, and I'll show you scans of the pages on how this is just all done in paragraph form. And I'm going to tell you, it took me forever to go through that and then figure out what does this mean? And the only way I could do it is putting it into visual form. Now the comprehension, don't think of this like comprehending, like I get it. That's not what this word means here. It doesn't mean I get it or I understand. But here, the comprehension of a term will refer to the internal meaning of the term or concept, like its content. This refers to the internal meaning. Crave goes on to say that the comprehension, and this is the way that I understand it, it includes the nature or the quality. Oftentimes, you'll find that this is where the definition lies. Yes?
Could a branch off of that be like breaking down the subject?
No, this is probably more of saying what the subject really is. And then the comprehension will say, but here's all the things that may exist within that. My graph will help.
So
Yes?
what was the second part of the phrase?
The comprehension of the term refers to the internal meaning or the content. And oftentimes this could be like a definition of a thing, okay? And so, again, I never want you to not ask questions, but if I don't ever want to appear dismissive, but I say just hold off, because oftentimes the next slide's going to explain it. And the third slide, when we talk about how not getting this right leads to misunderstandings in communication, that might just drive it home, and then you go, oh, I get it now. Because this is what I had to do. I'm just supposing that some of you guys who are very bright probably already know what that means. I would not have. Okay? I would not have. Okay, so let me put it on a graph. Now, anytime you put something on a graph, you risk simplifying it to the point where it may not always be true. But I think this is pretty good. All right. If I say that the bottom is calculating its comprehension, and the rise is the extension, I put up here that this is the external population. The comprehension is its inner meaning. Okay. So, for instance, if I were to talk about the term or concept of man, I would start to say, what is the inner meaning of man? Well, I would say things like we have being, we're alive, we're rational animals. Those are all things that would fall on the comprehension of man. They're the inner meanings, they have to do with his nature. Well, the fact that Earth's human inhabitants, all men, that's the extension. In other words, the class members that could be included in that, okay? Rational animal. It's a very basic, even if it's not an entirely, comprehensive. I don't know if she used that word. Well, it fits here. A rational animal is a definition of man, okay? But you notice animal, we fit into that class, okay? But if I'm trying to explain who man is, well, animal might be part of the population, but rational animal has more of the inner meaning of who I am and who you are. And when I use the word man here, we are talking about mankind. If you do have an issue with man being exclusively female, like I said, he has a nice little block in there that shows how philosophically, argumentative-wise, it has to remain that way. All right, so this isn't trying to be, against females. We're just using this as a general term. Now, what we're going to look at on the next slide, and just while you're probably trying to draw some of this, is that as one increases, the other decreases. And as one decreases, the other increases. You don't get both of these, right? You can't have the population of all animals, and within that, all of them are rational animals. You can't have those both. So as we start talking, as the rationality grows, you get farther away from all animals. The same thing with Earth's human inhabitants. We'll see that there are instances where some of us, may not be alive or rational, okay, and such. We'll get into that. So anyway, just know this. The basic things for your quiz, we'll know that the external population has the extension, okay? That's the class members of the thing. And comprehension has to do with the inner meaning of something, all right? So it's the quality of that thing. And again, I think the last slide where it shows why we have misunderstandings, we might even have a little discussion about it. Any questions at this point? Okay. Now let's talk about the inverse relation. As one of these, and these are qualities of abstraction. Remember, abstraction is not, gee, I don't know what's going on, this is so hard to understand. That's not abstraction. Abstraction has to do with, can I separate, like something accidental like the horn, off of one animal and put it on a unicorn? Am I able to do that in my mind? Can I separate these concrete things? So as one of these qualities of the abstraction increases, the other decreases. They're inversely proportional. That's simple to know. Even if you don't know why, it's simply to know that happens. Okay? So as comprehension increases, extension decreases. As extension increases, comprehension decreases. It just goes reverse. So if you see something on a quiz, just know that as one goes up, the other goes down. And if you know that, you're going to be good. Okay? You're going to be good. So the term, here's an example. The term writing instrument has more comprehension, has more internal meaning than pencil. Pencil's like one of the extensions of it. It's part of the population But the fact that if you had to think, what would be like an internal meaning of pencil? It's a writing instrument. But there are other writing instruments. There's other things that are going to belong to that population. So pencil, pen, fountain pen, marker, you name it, that's all in the extension of writing instrument. Writing instruments down in the comprehension, and that's more to do with the internal meaning. Think of it in terms of it looks more like a definition. If you're seeing something that looks more like a definition, you know you're getting down towards the comprehension. Okay? The term mammal, now I'm reversing it on you. Okay, I'm reversing it on you. So this is the upper left quadrant of your graph. The term mammal has more extension than dog. There's more in that population, okay, than there is in dog. Dogs, more of a comprehension of what exists within that population. And I have other examples. We're going to keep doing this, okay? And I still think the last slide helps when you start talking about the misunderstandings. I think that helps. Okay, so here's the blank graph, and I'm going to throw some things in there so you can see how they inversely are relational between comprehension and extension. Okay? And remember, extension is our external population, those individuals in the groups that would fit within the class, and comprehension is the inner meaning, the attributes. Now, you might be thinking, what does it have to do with anything, right? This one's going to be shown to be more practical than you think. Okay? And we are still trying to understand terms. We're in the first act of the mind. You know, if we can't understand terms, this simple apprehension, then how are we going to move into looking at propositions and arguments? I mean, so again, we're always falling back that either you were thinking about how you think or you do not think on how you think. And this is going to clear. When you guys do those word problems through SATs and other things that you're going to be doing, this is right up that alley. This is where that stuff comes from. Okay? Or this is where you apply that stuff, I should say. Okay. So, birds that fly would be the comprehension. Because there's an inner meaning. There's birds that typically fly. All right? All birds. That's the population. Right? Now I know, right? You're already probably thinking, well, not all birds fly. Good. Hold on to that thought. Because that's part of our misunderstandings that we're going to talk about in the next slide. So birds that fly, if you see that on a quiz, like if I show you, you know, true, I'd have to always compare it. You can't just say birds that fly is that comprehension and extension. You always have to compare it. So if I say in a multiple choice, what would be the extension of birds that fly, I'm going to use what you're seeing here. I'm not going to come up with some fancy other alternative, okay? If I would say all men, the entire population of all men, but what is a quality of men? And we're going to go over this again, so if you want to argue it, don't argue it yet. Well, typically we're not as emotionally present to those people around us. And here I'm talking males. I should have put males, to be honest, because that's what I'm after. So the comprehension is typically males. The inner meaning is we're not as emotionally present to those people around us. All men would be the entire population, the extension of that term of males. Okay, I should have put that up there. And if you're already starting to think, well, this is starting to sound like stereotypical, then good. Hold on to that thought, because then you're going right where I want you to go. If I were to say, well, typically within the nature of a woman, she has lower upper body strength. And the inverse proportion of that would be, the extension of that would be all women. Okay? And if you're already thinking that you know somebody that's a woman that has a better upper body strength than others, good, keep that. Because then you're going to get this. Okay? So, what do you need to know about all of this? Outside of the examples I gave you, remember, comprehension is the inner meaning, the attributes of that particular, whatever your term or concept you're talking about. The extension is the external population, all classes that may exist. All right? These are how we use terms. We may not know this as we do it, but the next slide, I'm hoping, will show you how many problems we have making discussions about this. Any questions yet? Okay. And he talks about this in the book. In other words, many people who reject generalizations, right? Many people who reject generalizations, and even though this may not be a precise distinction, I am going to make the distinction here in class between a generalization and a stereotype. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And you won't need to know that for the quiz, but I think it would certainly help you to know that, to make this clear. The problem is, many people who reject generalizations, they are confusing extension and comprehension. They're getting these two things confused. They don't realize they are different aspects of an abstract term. So they are confusing in extension and comprehension. Now, the reason why you should be reading your book before you do this is because you already have went over this once. And all I'd be doing is clearing it up, okay? Let me give you an example, and then I'll explain how this works. Well, no, actually, I want to hold off on the example because I think I don't want to be redundant, okay? So let's do this. You're confusing extension and comprehension.
They're confusing extension.
Extension and comprehension. That's what they confuse those two things. If you don't realize you're talking about two different aspects of a term or concept, then you're going to be either arguing past each other or you're going to be arguing about different things. And it's almost like you need somebody to step in and go, whoa, whoa, both of you, stop. You're arguing about blue and you're arguing about green. You may not know that, but this is the problem. So you may not agree, but your arguments aren't based in, in a rational discussion. So let's look at this. Once again, if I were to say that the inner meaning, the comprehension, is that birds fly, and the extension of it is that all birds that fly, somebody should wisely point out that not all birds fly. So how can something have the inner meaning that birds fly? Well, they are designed that way. They may not all have the capabilities of it. Yeah, but you just said that all birds fly, but all birds don't fly. Okay, you're confusing the inner meaning, the extent, the comprehension of the term that yes, birds are designed for flight, with the extension that yes, not all birds fly. You may be thinking in general terms of, you can't say, just because you're saying this about this person, doesn't mean you can say it about the whole population of a thing. And that could be true. Okay? So if we were having a discussion, me and you, about what would be a stereotype? Okay, a generalization would be all birds fly. I see something flying out there, and it's not man-made. A bird's a pretty good call. Okay? A bird's a pretty good call. A stereotype, at least the way I'm presenting it here, is that's a bird, it must fly because it's a bird. No, because I don't know that extends to every part of that population. That might be generally what's the inner comprehension of the term, but that doesn't mean every bird flies. So if I'm talking about birds fly, and somebody stands up and says, but they all don't fly, I understand that. But that's still an inequality. No, but they all don't fly, so it doesn't make any sense. Okay, you're talking about the extension of the term. I'm talking about the comprehension of the term. So we're not disagreeing, even though it seems like we're disagreeing out in the world. Do you get that? Let's do another one. Let's get more controversial. Males. I am saying that the inner attributes, right, of a male is they are not emotionally present for others. Now, you might take offense at that and say, well, I'm a male, and I'm always thinking of others, and I'm always, okay, fine. But I didn't say anything against that. Yes, you did. You said that males their inner meaning is that I'm emotionally present to others. No, you said that you are like that. You're referring to the extension of all males. I can't say all males. I am saying that this is the case. Well, why would I say something like that? Okay, let's reverse it. What if I were to say women are emotionally present to others? Oh, yeah, you never met my mom. Well, I didn't say anything about your mom. No, you said women are emotionally present to others. So you're just have some, stereotype. No, you're confusing the extension of what I'm saying is the inner meaning. Now, how does this play out in the world? Does anybody know the percentage of social workers and counselors? What percentage are women? Does anybody know in the United States? It's roughly 82%. That's because social work is discriminating against males, right? Or is it because the inner meaning is that women tend to be more emotionally present for others? Do you see how many classes of groups do we see some statistical disparity? And we claim because of a statistical disparity that therefore one is being discriminated against? And we never ask ourselves, which could be the case, but we never ask ourselves, or does it have something to do with the inner meaning of the comprehension of whatever groups within there?
Because men are also not, or also are emotionally present to others in some cases, would you also be able to say that men are emotionally present to others as the comprehension of the term as well?
No, because it's too low of an attribute.
Okay.
I mean, you'd have to really reduce the class somehow and try to do that.
Right.
All right. Okay. So typically, women do not go into engineering fields. Typical. Okay. Now you might be thinking, well, that's what I plan to do. Well, that's fine. Well, then you're just being sexist. Well, I'm not being sexist. I was having, here's what I was thinking about. I didn't want to get ahead of myself. I was in a discussion with a cousin of mine, right? And we were talking about distinctions between male and female, which, by the way, if you're a nominalist and you already don't think there's a nature, but if you are a moderate realist, like through Aristotle, you believe that there's a nature to woman and a nature to male. This isn't good or bad. This is what we see. Okay, so we were talking about that. And I think I know I shared this, guys, with you last year. Me and him were there talking, and this was my cousin who was passing away at the time. We were in hospice. And my cousin's wife was sitting alongside his bed holding his hand while me and my second cousin, male, were talking about the various attributes of male and female. And he just kept telling me I was sexist and being stereotypical. I said, no, I'm not being stereotypical. I'm making generalizations based on various attributes of the human person. In other words, I was arguing the comprehension of male and female. He kept arguing the extension of male and female. And he even said about, I said, well, what about engineering? I said, even when they, women, they tend to put women into that category, you still find that unless you force a situation, men tend to rise in that field. His argument was, look at my mom. My mom is an exception. She was the first woman that graduated from General Motors School of Engineering. And I said, but you just said, prove my point. You just said how she's the exception. But that's still sexist. Okay, do you see? Our argument was not about the goodness or a quality of woman that was made them better or worse than male. We weren't even talking about that. Me and him were talking about two different things. I was talking about the comprehension. He was talking about the extension. If you know this, now you're never going to do this out in the world. This is what will make you frustrated learning logic. You're going to be in these conversations. And unless you have a philosophy professor in front of you or somebody trained in syllogistic logic, and you say, well, but what you're talking about is the extension, I was referring to the comprehension, you have lost it at that point. So you have to find a way to say it in another way, okay? This isn't complimentary to men, okay? I mean, in other words, jokes won't work unless this is true. My husband, he never listens. Or when you go to an audiologist, does your husband have hearing problems or does he have selective hearing? That's the joke. How would that joke work if this didn't have some validity to it, right? I mean, the humor is all based on this, okay? All right. Enough picking on men. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Women have lower upper body strength than men. Mrs. Bueno says, yeah, but I know some guys weigh like 115 pounds and they can barely push themselves off the ground. That's true. She just, in that sentence, referred to the extension of women. overall. In other words, again, I'm not trying to stir up the pot, okay? But I have friends who are in the special forces, or were in special forces.
I'm sorry, but what's lower upper body strength?
Did I write lower upper body? Oh, you have it decreased. Like, in other words, your upper body strength is lower than the males. So a woman. Yeah, I didn't mean like I should have reworded that. It wasn't a clear way to word it. Lesser. That would have been good. Yes. Okay. So. Okay. So, does this say something negatively about women? How could it?
Can I have a drink?
What? Is that you?
Okay, shh. Okay. Next time, not to disrupt the thoughts. Yes.
Even though it's a fact, someone might find it offensive.
They might. But I guess my point is this. We were never talking about the extension of it. You know, in other words, does anybody know Faith Powell? She graduated from here. The girl's like ripped. I mean, I don't know what else do you say. Have you seen pictures of her? I mean, the girl is ripped. She looks like, professional. She is. I don't know if she's professional, but she's been in competitions. We would never say her Faith Powell. Okay. Okay. Now look, are women? If I were to say here, the comprehension of women is that they are shorter in stature than men. How do you argue against that when that's generally the term? And somebody says, but I know women. See, there's a lot of things that come to bear on this stuff. One, the emotional background, right, of egalitarianism, that everything has to be equal, and anytime we see any statistical disparity, that somehow that's an affront to the other person. Some men may very well have been, been a little incised that I said they're typically not emotionally present to women, as good as women. But I don't think there's a woman here that knows that's probably your general experience. You're not talking about this particular external population. We're only talking about here. Okay?
Would you be able to put typically in front of one of the statements, or would that, like...
Well, no, because it's implied. It's implied. In other words, if we were to say that if we were talking about fish that swim, there's flying fish. We're not excluding that, We're talking about attributes, maybe general attributes, but things that are more inherent within that, okay? So it's implied that when you talk about the extension of the comprehension of something, that you're not talking about all. I mean, that's if you get that, if this bothers you, and you get that you can't be talking about everything here, now you got it. Now you understand what comprehension is. It's the inner attributes of a term that never can be applied wholesale to all the external classes. If you get that, that's why I thought this last slide would really clear that up. All right? So it has my wife. If my wife is not a large woman. If you would see her upper body strength, you would not put her in that. You would say she doesn't belong to this class. Because in our machines down at the pottery, you are literally, it's about this high, and you are literally lifting 40 to 60 pounds straight up. That's not easy. I've had guys down there that struggled with it. In fact, I get such a kick out of it. Before I started working here, and I was down at shop or in the summer, when we pack up our boxes of pottery, we keep them around 70 pounds. Because that seems to be something that somebody could handle, right? So we load our dock with these 70-pound boxes, and then whoever's coming to pick it up. It could be the Lions Club, it could be an historical society. But what I often see is that these two guys will come and they each grab a side of the box and they're carrying it. And they turn around and my wife's there with one walking behind them. And I don't miss a chance. I always go, feeling like men, boys? Because here's a woman, but see, that wouldn't even make any sense if it weren't typically not true. If women overall, if the comprehension of women is that they typically had a higher upper body strength than others, then that would make no sense. Everybody would say, well, you would expect that, right? So a lot of times our issues in our discussions that look like they are simply, stereotypes have to do with our confusing comprehension and extension. Now, why would I say this? Well, in the last minute or two, because if we're having discussions, and remember, this is about to think reasonably. Like if I were to say to you, you say somebody might find it offensive, somebody's going to find this offensive, but you shouldn't. In special forces, and I have two friends that were in the Rangers and the Navy SEALs. You know how they allow women now into special forces training. This is just the data. The top 10% performing women perform at the lower 10% of the males. Now, if somebody finds that offensive, somebody's going to have to ask, why? It's what we would expect by body strength. Okay? Now, does that mean that there are not people that are qualified? No, it couldn't mean that, because then I would be confusing comprehension and extension. Now, if we're having that discussion out in the world, could you imagine a news program where somebody said that? What would come out of that? It would start a fist fight. Because and they would be arguing about two different things. And somebody would inevitably say, all you're doing is being stereotypical. No, I'm making generalizations based on the data of a population. If I'm going to say one particular, let me put it this way. If somebody says, you're Italian, you must like spaghetti. Well, hold on, no, let me make my point. That's not true. That's a stereotype. But if you say, I got a bunch of Italians come over, what should I make? Spaghetti's a good deal. Because that's typically of that population. Like if somebody says it's offensive that you guys think all you guys eat is bread, pasta, and cheese, I'm going to say that is all we eat. Okay? But does that mean every Italian within that population eat that? No. Because you're confusing the extension with the comprehension. Yes?
You change why